Most people think consistency is about discipline, about forcing yourself to do things you don't feel like doing, about willpower, grit, and pushing harder. But that's not where consistency actually begins. Consistency begins with identity, because long before you repeat an action, you repeat a belief. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you believe you are. When you wake up early, you're not just waking up early, you're reinforcing the belief that you are someone who keeps promises. When you show up prepared, you're not just being prepared, you're reinforcing the belief that you are reliable. And when you quit, even quietly, even once, you're teaching yourself something too. This is why intensity fails most people. Intensity is fueled by emotion. Identity is fueled by meaning. Emotion fades, meaning stays. If you want to understand why consistency feels so hard, it's because many people are trying to build habits that don't match who they believe they are. They want the results of a disciplined person without becoming one. They want the confidence of a consistent person without paying the price of repetition. And the brain resists that mismatch. Consistency isn't something you do. It's something you become. The most consistent people don't wake up every day debating whether to show up. They already decided who they are. The decision was made once, and the behavior follows automatically. That's why saying, "I'll try" is so dangerous. "I'll try" leaves the door open for negotiation. But identity doesn't negotiate. You don't wake up and debate whether you are yourself today. You simply are. When consistency is tied to identity, effort decreases, resistance decreases, because acting inconsistently would feel like betrayal. This is why lasting change doesn't start with a checklist. It starts with a mirror. Ask yourself this: who do you believe you are when no one is watching? Not who you want to be, not who you say you are, but who your actions prove you are, because your habits are not random. They are perfectly aligned with your self-image. People who say, "I'm just not disciplined," are not describing a flaw. They're declaring an identity. And the brain's job is to protect identity at all costs, even if that identity is limiting. So every time they try to act disciplined, their mind pushes back. Not because they are weak, but because inconsistency feels safer than becoming someone unfamiliar. Consistency threatens the old version of you, and the old version will fight to survive. That's why the first step is not doing more. It's redefining who you are allowed to be. Instead of saying, "I need to work out consistently," say, "I am someone who does not skip movement." Instead of saying, "I need to focus," say, "I am someone who finishes what they start." Instead of saying, "I need motivation," say, "I am someone who shows up regardless of how I feel." Words matter because they shape identity. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior, repeated long enough, shapes destiny. Here's something most people never realize. Consistency actually reduces stress. Inconsistency creates anxiety. When you don't know whether you'll show up for yourself, your mind stays restless. But when your identity is clear, decisions disappear. You conserve energy. You move forward with certainty. This is why leaders who are consistent feel kind to be around. You know what to expect from them. You trust them. And that trust doesn't come from charisma. It comes from predictability over time. And the same is true with yourself. When you become consistent, you stop living in conflict. You stop arguing with yourself every morning. You stop bargaining with your future. You move with alignment. Consistency is integrity in action. Integrity isn't about being perfect. It's about being whole. Doing what you said you would do. Being the same person on hard days as you are on easy days. And this is where most people lose the game, not on the big days, but on the ordinary ones. The boring days. The days when nothing exciting happens. Because identity is proven in repetition, not in moments. Anyone can show up once. Anyone can be intense for a week. But identity is revealed on day 30, day 60, day 100, when no one is cheering. And the results are still invisible. That's when the question isn't, "Can I do this?" The question becomes, "Is this who I am?" When the answer is yes, consistency becomes natural. And once consistency becomes natural, something powerful happens. You stop needing external validation. You no longer rely on praise, applause, or recognition. You know who you are, and that internal certainty is unshakable. This is why consistent people are hard to stop. You can criticize them, ignore them, doubt them, but it doesn't change their behavior. because they are not acting for approval. They are acting in alignment. Inconsistency comes from confusion. Consistency comes from clarity. Clarity about values, clarity about standards, clarity about identity. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do the right things consistently. And right is defined by who you choose to be. The moment you stop asking, what should I do today? And start asking, what would someone like me do today? Everything shifts. Consistency stops being heavy. Discipline stops feeling forced. Progress stops feeling accidental. You become predictable in the best possible way. And over time, people won't just notice your results, they'll notice your reliability. They'll trust you with responsibility. They'll believe your words. They'll invest in you. Not because you promised, but because you proved. This is how consistency becomes unstoppable. Not through pressure, not through fear, but through identity that no longer needs permission when you know who you are. Showing up is no longer a decision. It's simply who you are. Most people believe motivation is the engine of progress. They wait for it, chase it, try to summon it on demand. And when it disappears, as it always does, they assume something is wrong with them. But motivation was never meant to be trusted. Motivation is emotional. It responds to excitement, novelty, and quick wins. And when those fade, motivation fades with them. Consistency, on the other hand, doesn't ask how you feel. This is where most people get stuck. They build their lives around emotions instead of structures. They decide what to do based on mood, energy, or inspiration. And emotions by nature are unpredictable. That's why progress feels random for so many people. Some days they're unstoppable. Other days they disappear. The problem isn't lack of desire. It's lack of systems. Systems are what carry you when motivation can't. Systems remove choice. They remove negotiation. They create default behavior. And when behavior becomes default, consistency becomes inevitable. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up motivated to do it. You don't debate whether it's worth it today. You do it because it's part of your system. It's automatic. And because it's automatic, it's consistent. The most successful people apply the same principle to everything that matters. They don't rely on inspiration to do deep work. They schedule it. They don't rely on willpower to stay healthy. They design their environment. They don't rely on emotion to act with disc, pipeline. They remove options. Consistency isn't about pushing harder. It's about designing smarter. When people say they lack discipline, what they often lack is structure. They expect themselves to make good decisions in moments of weakness. But consistent people don't trust their future selves. They plan for their future selves. They know that tired them, stressed them, distracted them will show up. So they build systems that work even on bad days. This is why habits beat goals. Goals are outcomes. Habits are behaviors. Goals live in the future. Habits live in the present. And only what lives in the present can be repeated daily. You don't rise because you want something badly. You rise because your daily systems don't allow you to fall too far. Consistency is not heroic. It's mechanical. It's boring on purpose. And that boredom is its power. When something's boring, it's sustainable. When something is exciting, it burns out. Most people confuse excitement with effectiveness. They chase new strategies, new routines, new shortcuts. But every restart costs momentum. Every change resets trust with yourself. Consistency compounds, but only if you stop interrupting it. This is why starting is easy and continuing is rare. Starting feels hopeful. Continuing feels repetitive. And repetition is where most people quit. But repetition is also where mastery lives. The best athletes don't practice until they get it right. They practice until they can't get it wrong. That only happens through systems that force repetition long after motivation is gone. Systems protect you from yourself. They decide for you when you don't want to decide. They move you forward when you don't feel like moving. They create progress even when emotions are noisy. This is also why environment matters more than willpower. You don't need more discipline. You need fewer temptations. You don't need stronger motivation. You need clearer boundaries. Distraction is always within reach. Inconsistency becomes the default. But if the environment makes the right choice easy and the wrong choice hard, consistency follows naturally. Consistent people don't live perfect lives. They live designed lives. They know that if they leave things to chance, chance will win. So they reduce friction for good habits and increase friction for bad ones. They lay out their clothes the night before. They schedule their work instead of waiting to feel ready. They protect their morning because mornings shape momentum. None of this is dramatic. That's the point. Consistency thrives in simplicity. Another mistake people make is trying to be consistent in everything. That's impossible. Consistent people choose their priorities carefully. They decide what deserves daily attention and what can wait. Consistency doesn't mean doing more. It means doing less better. You don't need 10 habits. You need 2 or 3 non-negotiables. A small set of actions that, if done daily, make everything else easier. When these actions are systemized, progress becomes predictable. And predictability builds confidence. Confidence doesn't come from thinking positively. It comes from knowing you will do what you said you would do regardless of how you feel. This is why consistency feels powerful. It removes doubt. When you know your system will carry you, fear loses its grip. You stop worrying about whether you'll stay on track because the track is already laid. Over time, something subtle but profound happens. You stop celebrating motivation and start trusting process. You stop chasing peaks and start valuing stability. And stability is what creates unstoppable momentum. Momentum isn't created by big wins. It's created by unbroken chains of small actions. Miss one day, and it feels harmless. Miss several, and identity begins to crack. That's why consistent people protect streaks, not out of obsession, but out of respect. They understand that consistency is fragile at the beginning and powerful at the end. They don't ask, how hard can I push today? They ask, what can I repeat tomorrow? Because sustainability beats intensity every time. Eventually, the system does something remarkable. It carries you past the point where quitting feels logical, past the point where others give up, past the point where results become visible. And from the outside, it looks like discipline, it looks like strength, it looks like being unstoppable. But from the inside, it feels simple. Most boring. That's the paradox. The things that change your life don't feel extraordinary in the moment. They feel ordinary, repeated faithfully. Motivation will come and go. Emotion will rise and fall. Life will interrupt, but systems remain. And if you build systems that reflect who you are and what you stand for, consistency will no longer depend on how you feel. It will depend on who you decided to be and the structures you built to protect that decision. That's how consistency outlasts motivation. That's how effort becomes automatic. That's how progress becomes unstoppable. Most people underestimate the power of small actions because they are invisible. They don't announce themselves, they don't feel impressive, and they rarely produce immediate results. In a world addicted to speed and spectacle, small daily actions feel insignificant. So people dismiss them. They wait for the big move, the perfect moment, a dramatic breakthrough. But progress doesn't respond to drama. Progress responds to consistency. The truth is, nothing extraordinary is built in a single moment. Everything meaningful is built slowly, quietly, and repeatedly. And the people who win in the long run are not the ones who do the most in a day, but the ones who do enough every day. Small actions are powerful, not because of what they do today, but because of what they become over time. Consistency creates an unfair advantage because it compounds. And compounding is misunderstood. People think NK compounding is about speed. It's not. It's about duration. Doing something small once changes nothing. Doing something small every day changes everything. Most people quit too early because they expect linear results from exponential effort. They put in work for a short time and expect massive change. When it doesn't happen, they assume the effort isn't working. But the effort was working, it just hadn't had enough time. Consistency rewards patience. And patience is rare. This is why 2 people can start in the same place, with the same resources, the same intelligence, and the same opportunities, and end up in completely different places. One stayed consistent, the other stopped. The difference wasn't talent, it wasn't luck, it was time multiplied by repetition. Small actions work beneath the surface before they ever show results above it. Confidence builds before it shows. Skill improves before it's noticed. Trust is earned before it's given. And because these changes are invisible at first, most people quit during the most important phase, the phase where growth is happening but proof is missing. Consistent people understand this phase, and they don't need immediate feedback. They don't need applause. They don't need reassurance. They trust the process because they understand how progress actually works. This is what creates an unfair advantage. What others are waiting for signs. Consistent people are stacking days. They show up when it feels pointless. They repeat. Actions that feel too small to matter. They stay when others leave. And over time, the gap widens. One of the biggest lies people believe is that success comes from big decisions. In reality, it comes from small decisions made repeatedly. Choosing to start. Choosing not to skip. Choosing to finish, even when the result is average. Excellence is not intensity. Excellence is reliability. Anyone can push hard for a short period, but pushing hard and stopping produces nothing lasting. Consistency, even at low intensity, outperforms bursts of effort every time. This is why mastery looks boring from the outside. The routines are simple. The actions are repetitive. The progress is gradual. But the results, given enough time, look extraordinary. And once momentum builds, consistency stops feeling slow. It starts feeling inevitable. People often ask, how long will it take? That question misses the point. Consistency doesn't work on a timeline you can predict. It works on a threshold, a moment where effort accumulates enough to break through. And you never know when that moment will come, which is why stopping early is the only guaranteed way to miss it. Small actions also remove pressure. When you commit to doing something small, daily resistance decreases. The task feels manageable. The mind doesn't panic. And because the bar is low, consistency stays high. Consistent people don't aim to impress themselves. They aim to continue. They understand that showing up at 60 pers, NT every day beats showing up at 100% once a week. Because consistency protects momentum. And momentum protects belief. Belief grows when you see yourself follow through repeatedly. Not in big moments, but in small ones. Each small action is evidence. Evidence that you are capable. Evidence that you can be trusted. Evidence that progress is happening even if it's slow. Over time, this evidence changes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You start seeing yourself as someone who does. That identity shift is powerful because once you believe that your actions matter, you stop dismissing small efforts. You respect them. You protect them. And that's when the unfair advantage becomes visible. Others see results and call it overnight success. They don't see the months of quiet consistency. They don't see the days when nothing seemed to change. They only see the outcome, not the accumulation. But accumulation is where the real work happens. This is why consistent people don't chase shortcuts. They don't look for hacks. They understand that shortcuts skip the compounding phase, and without compounding, nothing lasts. Small actions also create resilience. When life interrupts, and it will, consistent people don't collapse because their progress isn't dependent on perfect conditions. It's built on repetition. Missing one day doesn't break them because identity remains intact. They return. They continue. They keep stacking. And that ability to return is part of the unfair advantage. Many people quit not because they fail, but because they fail once and assume it means something about them. Consistent people see failure as data, not identity. They adjust. They continue. Over time, the results become undeniable. Skills sharpen. Confidence deepens. Opportunities multiply, not suddenly, but steadily. And eventually, the gap between consistent effort and inconsistent effort becomes so wide that it looks like talent. But it's not talent. It's time, multiplied by consistency. The world doesn't compete with consistency. It rewards it. Because when you show it long enough, your small actions stop being small. They stack. They connect. They build momentum that others can't catch up to. And that's when consistency becomes unfair. Not because you did more in a day, but because you did enough every day for longer than anyone else was willing to. That's the quiet power of small actions. That's how consistency turns ordinary effort into unstoppable progress. Trust is one of the most powerful forces in the world. It determines who we follow, who we listen to, and who we believe. But most people think trust is something you earn from others. They overlook the most important form of trust, the trust you have with yourself. Self-trust is the foundation of consistency. Without it, discipline feels forced. Confidence feels fragile and progress feels uncertain. With it, action becomes natural and follow-through becomes predictable. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens self-trust. Every promise you break weakens it. And most people don't realize how often they quietly break promises to themselves. Snoozing alarms, delaying commitments, starting and stopping without finishing. These moments seem small, but they send a powerful message to the brain. The message is simple: I can't rely on myself. Over time, that message shapes behavior. When you don't trust yourself, you hesitate, you overthink, you look for external validation. You wait for permission, and inconsistency becomes the norm, not because you are incapable, but because your inner foundation is unstable. Consistency repairs that foundation. Self-trust isn't built through big declarations. It's built through small, boring follow-through. Doing what you said you would do even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching. This is why confidence doesn't come from hype or positive thinking. It comes from evidence, from watching yourself show up again and again, from proving through action that your words mean something. When self-trust is strong, you don't need motivation. You don't need reminders. You act because you believe in your own reliability. Most people seek discipline when what they really need is trust. Discipline feels like force. Trust feels like alignment. And alignment removes friction. When you trust yourself, decisions become easier. You don't debate whether to act, you act. You don't question your ability to follow through, you assume you will. That assumption becomes a self-fulfilling pattern. This is also why inconsistency is so draining. Every time you fail to follow through, you create internal conflict. You promise one thing and do another. That split creates guilt, frustration, and self-doubt. Over time, it erodes confidence. Consistency heals that split. It brings your words and actions back into agreement. And when that happens, energy returns, focus sharpens, confidence stabilizes. Self-trust also changes how you handle failure. When trust is weak, failure feels like proof that you're incapable. When trust is strong, failure feels like feedback. You don't collapse, you adjust. Consistent people don't avoid failure. They recover quickly because they trust their ability to return. That ability to return is everything. Life will interrupt. Plans will break. Motivation will disappear. But if you trust yourself, none of that becomes fatal. You know you'll come back. And that certainty is calming. This is why leaders who are consistent feel safe to follow. You trust them not because they are perfect, but because they are predictable. You know they will respond in line with their values. The same principle applies internally. When you know how you will respond to challenge, you stop fearing it. Consistency builds that predictability, and predictability builds trust. Self-trust also creates boundaries. When you trust yourself, you don't overcommit. You don't promise what you can't deliver. You choose carefully because you value your word. And when you give your word, you honor it. That restraint is powerful. Many people say yes to everything and follow through on nothing. Consistent people say yes less, but follow through more. And that reliability becomes their reputation. First with themselves, then with others. This is how NCY quietly turns into leadership. People don't follow passion. They follow reliability. They follow those who show up steadily, respond consistently, and act in alignment over time. And it all starts internally. If you want to build self-trust, start small. Smaller than you think you need to. Make promises you can keep. Then keep them. Let the evidence accumulate. Don't promise an hour. Promise 10 minutes. Don't promise perfection. Promise presence. Don't promise forever. Promise today. Every kept promise is a brick, and self-trust is built brick by brick. Once self-trust is strong, confidence stops being fragile. It no longer depends on praise or results. It depends on your relationship with yourself. And that relationship changes everything. You stop doubting your ability to stay consistent. You stop fearing setbacks. You stop questioning your worth because you've proven through repetition that you are dependable. That dependability becomes your anchor. In chaos, you remain steady. In uncertainty, you remain grounded. In difficulty, you remain in motion. This is why consistency feels powerful. Not because it guarantees success, but because it guarantees stability. And stability is what allows growth to happen. You can't build on shaky ground. Self-trust is the ground. When you trust yourself, you stop looking outside for certainty. You stop chasing motivation. You stop waiting for confidence. You act. And action repeated long enough creates momentum. T can't be easily broken. Over time, that momentum becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. Consistency isn't just about doing the same thing every day. It's about becoming someone you can rely on. When you become that person, you don't just move forward. You move forward without fear. Because you know, no matter what happens, you will show up. And that quiet certainty is what makes you unstoppable. Most people believe success is about winning, about beating others, about standing out in dramatic ways. But success, in its truest form, is not about being better than someone else. It's about becoming inevitable. Inevitability is what happens when quitting is no longer an option. Ordinary people become extraordinary not because they are exceptional, but because they stay. They remain when others leave. They continue when others get distracted. They persist when others decide it's too hard, too slow, or too uncertain. Consistency doesn't make you impressive at first. It makes you impossible to ignore over time. This is why the most impactful people rarely look special in the beginning. They don't announce their plans. They don't demand attention. They simply keep showing up. And while others chase quick wins, they build something that cannot be undone. Consistency turns effort into inevitability. When you remove quitting as an option, the mind adapts. It stops looking for exits and starts looking for solutions. Creativity increases, resilience strengthens. Aches become problems to solve instead of reasons to stop. Most people quit mentally long before they quit physically. They keep showing up, but they've already decided the effort won't last. That decision changes how they act. They hesitate. They hold back. They protect themselves from disappointment. Consistent people decide something different. They decide quietly and firmly that they are staying. That decision changes everything. When you decide you're staying, time becomes your ally. You no longer rush. You no longer panic. You no longer compare your pace to others. You understand that the longer you remain consistent, the more advantage you gain. This is why ordinary actions, repeated long enough, become extraordinary results. Not because the actions change, but because the number of people willing to repeat them shrinks over time. At the beginning, everyone is motivated, everyone is excited, everyone believes. But as weeks turn into months, enthusiasm fades. Life intervenes, discomfort appears. And that's where inevitability is born. Each time someone else quits, your relative position improves even if you don't change anything. Each time someone stops, the path becomes less crowded. And if you keep going, eventually, there's no competition left. This is not arrogance. It's mathematics. Consistency over time always wins against intensity over time. Ordinary people become unstoppable the moment they stop seeing quitting as a decision. They accept struggle as part of the path, not as a signal to stop. They understand that discomfort is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of growth. This mindset creates patience, and patience allows compounding to do its work. Compounding doesn't reward effort immediately. It rewards loyalty to the process. It rewards those who don't interrupt momentum. And momentum, once established, is difficult to stop. Eventually, consistency changes how the world responds to you. People begin to trust your presence. Opportunities come not because you asked, but because you've proven reliability over time. You become the person. People expect to still be there. That expectation is powerful. It means your work carries weight. Your words carry credibility. Your actions carry influence, and none of it came from trying to be impressive. It came from being dependable. This is why consistency builds quiet leadership. You don't need to convince anyone of your commitment. They see it, they feel it, they experience it over time. Consistency also creates calm. When you know you're staying, anxiety decreases. You stop worrying about outcomes you can't control and focus on actions you can. That focus sharpens execution. Execution improves results. And improved results reinforce commitment. This loop: commitment, action, result, create inevitability. At some point, success stops feeling like a possibility and starts feeling like a matter of time. Not because you're guaranteed a specific outcome, but because why? I've eliminated the one thing that prevents progress: quitting. When quitting is off the table, failure becomes temporary. Setbacks become adjustments. Slow periods become part of the rhythm. Nothing becomes final except your commitment. This is how ordinary people become extraordinary. They don't wait to feel confident. They don't wait to feel ready. They don't wait for certainty. They commit first. And confidence follows consistency, not the other way around. Over time, consistency reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hopes. You see yourself as someone who follows through. That identity is powerful because it doesn't depend on outcomes. It depends on behavior. And behavior is something you can control every day. This is why consistency is the great equalizer. It doesn't care where you started. It doesn't care how talented you are. It rewards those who remain. When talent fades, consistency remains. When motivation disappears, consistency continues. When conditions change, consistency adapts. Eventually, the results speak for themselves. People will ask how you did it. They'll look for secrets, shortcuts, turning points. But there was no moment. There was only repetition. Day after day, action after action, choice after choice. Staying when leaving would have been easier. And that's the truth mode. People don't want to hear because it's simple, but it's not easy. Consistency doesn't promise speed. It promises inevitability. If you stay long enough, if you repeat long enough, if you refuse to quit long enough, progress becomes unavoidable. Not because the world owes you anything, but because the world eventually rewards those who don't leave. That is how ordinary effort becomes extraordinary results. That is how consistency turns into inevitability. And that is how you become unstoppable, not by force, but by staying. Consistency is not the loud part of success. It's the quiet part, the part no one applauds, the part no one posts about, the part that happens when motivation is gone and the results are still invisible. But it is also the part that decides everything. If there's one truth to take away, it is this: consistency is not about doing extraordinary things. It is about doing ordinary things with extraordinary commitment. Again, and again, and again. You don't become unstoppable by trying harder for a short time. You become unstoppable by refusing to stop over a long time. When consistency becomes part of who you are, quitting no longer feels like relief. It feels like a betrayal of your own identity. The people who win are not the most intense. They are the most reliable. They show up when it's boring. They continue when it's uncomfortable. They stay when others decide it's easier to leave. And over time, staying becomes their advantage. Consistency builds trust first with yourself, then with the world. Every small promise you keep strengthens your confidence. Every repeated action sharpens your belief. And slowly, quietly, you become someone you can rely on. That self-trust becomes the foundation for courage, discipline, and growth. And here's the paradox: the more consistent you are, the less effort it feels like. Decisions disappear. Doubt fades. Momentum carries you forward. What once required willpower becomes automatic. What once felt heavy becomes natural. This is how ordinary people achieve extraordinary outcomes, not through talent alone, not through motivation alone, but through loyalty to the process. When no one is watching, you don't need to do everything. You just need to do the right things consistently. You don't need to move fast. You need to keep moving, because time, when combined with consistency, does the work you cannot do alone. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel inspired. Decide who you are. Decide what you stand for. And then show up as that person, especially on the days it feels hardest. Because the world doesn't reward potential. It rewards proof. And consistency is proof, repeated daily. Be so consistent that doubt loses its voice. Be so consistent that quitting is no longer an option. Be so consistent that success stops being a question of if and becomes only a matter of when. That is how consistency turns effort into inevitability. That is how you become unstoppable.